Elden Ring is an experience that surprised many, a game that can and should shape the future of this game's industry. However, how much so appears to be a big question mark right now among fans and developers. When Elden Ring isn't going viral because of hilarious, bizarre, and intense gameplay clips, it's sparking conversation about why this game specifically became a cultural phenomenon, a journey that stands alongside the best of the last decade and arguably sets a new standard for what gamers want to see in terms of innovative design that is most definitely not for everyone, a sentence that shouldn't be so controversial, but it is. Elden Ring released over 356 days ago, and now I feel it's time to talk about the mark that this game has made on this industry and the unfortunate truths that it has revealed about games criticism. But before we take on the lands between, I want to thank Factor for sponsoring today's video. As someone who has been working to get back into shape, this is where Factor comes in with delicious, nutritious, quick meals such as this garlic mushroom chicken thighs with creamy cauliflower rice and garlic green beans that I ate the other day, alongside this strawberry banana smoothie that I cannot get enough of. With 34 different weekly meal options from breakfast, lunch, and dinner to an assortment of 45 plus add-ons such as these honey yogurt pancakes that I'm already eyeing, Factor is America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit for a reason. They are and have been my direct answer to cutting back on takeout and also saving some money and time in doing so, which is huge because I work long hours in the office and before these meals resorted to, again, cheap fast food. All of Factor's fresh, never frozen, chef-prepared meals are ready in just 2 minutes with a variety of meal options available each week that cater towards what you're looking for in your diet, whether that be keto to vegan to calorie smart. To all three combined, you can mix match to whatever your heart desires. It's clean eating done right and easy. If you're looking to upgrade your lifestyle and begin a delicious new journey, head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code LEGACYKILLA50 to get 50% off your first Factor box. Thank you again to Factor for sponsoring today's video. Entering 2022, there was much conversation about the stacked gaming lineup: Nintendo with Breath of the Wild 2, Bethesda's Starfield, GSC Game World Stalker 2, Avalanche's Hogwarts Legacy, Rocksteady's Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, Sony Santa Monica's God of War Ragnarok, Guerrilla Games' Horizon Forbidden West, and FromSoft's Elden Ring, to name a few. It's just a bit unfortunate that about half of these big releases suffered lengthy delays out of this year into next. One probably should have been delayed considering the beating that it suffered. At launch, Elden Ring was showered in praise from both critics and users, one of the best video games of the last decade, a stunning achievement, out of this world, a masterclass in world design, a new standard in open world games, an unrivaled feat of design and inventiveness, and a genre-defining classic. This a short sample of the high praise that reviewers gave this experience. Still though, it was met to a series of outrage, some of which was in regards to its quote-unquote unwelcoming design, some of it was in regards to its lack of accessibility, some of it was in regards to it not having an easy mode, some of it was in regards to its bugginess, and then there were the numerous individuals, gamers, and developers that defined Elden Ring as overrated. This specific criticism is happening a lot more now, coming at a time in which the Game of the Year awards are being handed out, and of course the successful launch of God of War Ragnarok, which was met to universal critic and user acclaim, is and has been compared to Elden Ring, two of the biggest releases of 2022 that approach game design very differently. It's the perfect storm of people finding reason to dismiss Elden Ring as nothing more than Dark Souls, but with an open world, which is disrespectful in my opinion to what From Software built and accomplished here. Elden Ring is, without a doubt, a game that will define 2022. It's not the cinematic, story-focused thriller that we so often see in what captures the attention of mainstream critics and audiences. It's the sort of RPG that some developers will try to copy, with the incorrect lesson likely being applied that they just need to make their game harder, because that surely enough is the only reason why people like Elden Ring, right? No. But look out for Ubisoft to do this shit. Once their Witcher 3 light Assassin's Creed formula dries up, they'll move on to the next popular thing and do it in half-assed fashion. Elden Ring released back in February of 2022, just over a year ago, and finally it feels the hype has worn off a bit of the base experience. The attention has turned to the recently announced Shadow the Erdtree expansion and the future of From Software, which includes the revival of what was believed to be a dormant franchise. But today, I wanted to revisit this experience, discussing whether or not it deserved the love and frustration that it received. Elden Ring very much is not a game for everyone, something that some seem unable to accept, even if it is probably the quote-unquote recommended game for newcomers who have never played a FromSoft game before. It still is full of the usual BS. I myself have never been big on these experiences, not because I can't get good, but because I don't have hours to glue to the screen getting spanked by an early game boss, whether that be in Dark Souls or Bloodborne. With that said, Elden Ring for some reason did click for me. It was a game that definitely has an unrelenting amount of BS, especially fighting this fucker before he eventually was nerfed. I did beat him before that nerf. Still though, the sense of wonder and discovery is grand here. The open world is vast and varied. Unlike the usual Ubisoft experience, there is no hand-holding and your screen being bombarded with notifications of what you need to do. Elden Ring is all about paying attention and learning. If not, then you'll probably end up on YouTube trying to figure out where to go next. To be fair, even if you do pay attention, you'll probably still find yourself looking at a few guides. It all really depends on how valuable time is to the player, because certainly this experience encourages the player to explore everywhere and take on nearly every challenge thrown their way. The big difference here versus past FromSoft games is that if something like a boss fight is too much of a challenge, then you have the freedom to go somewhere else, face a different, maybe easier set of challenges, level up your character, discover better gear, and then eventually return to that boss fight and hopefully kick their ass. Back in February, the journey of my Tarnished began with spending well over an hour figuring out what class I wanted to invest in, and then creating the most bland protagonist I could come up with. You certainly can create some epic monstrosities if you so wish. Afterwards, I advanced into the Lands Between, an unforgiving world full of mystery and darkness. I'm quickly presented with a very unique path ahead, and that is one decided by myself. There is no clear indication of where to go and what quest to take on. Hell, you can very easily skip the tutorial area by accident, something that I did. This design choice is one that seemingly pissed off some Western game developers who felt that it went against everything that they've been taught in game development. But honestly, I feel those criticisms are unwarranted and more of an indictment on how game quality is stagnated in the open world genre. There's a reason why so many people look at these types of games with boredom and exhaustion before even playing, and that is because of the expectation that it will be bloated. Ubisoft especially has mastered this, turning games that could easily be around 20 hours to north of 100 hours with collectibles, hundreds of map markers, repetitive side activities, and story missions that don't get to the fucking point. That's not necessarily a major issue if the writing is superb, characters and the story feels like it's developing, and missions feel engaging, but most open world titles struggle with that. Pacing is so key to that formula. Even with some of my personal favorite games of this genre, they all fall into this trap of having side activities and tons of map markers that just feels like it's there to give the player reassurances that their time investment will be worth it, with tons of adventures outside of the main path awaiting them, but not necessarily quality that is remotely equal to the cinematic main storyline that you so often see in these types of games. It's especially egregious when those map markers end up being a useless chest of loot and or a 2-minute fetch quest. Unless one is a completionist, it's the sort of design choice that will persuade most players to not engage with that content, having the opposite effect than the developers likely anticipated. With Elden Ring though, it's most similar to Breath of the Wild with FromSoft's signature Dark Souls touch, if a comparison needed to be made. On the surface, it has simplicity with its design, of which requires players' complete attention. There isn't hand-holding, listening or reading dialogue carefully, and exploring your surroundings is key to realizing your ultimate objective of becoming the Elden Lord. Something of which may feel basic at first, but the real complexity comes with the journey to that endpoint. Players are presented with more freedom than ever. In those first few minutes of making it to Limgrave, your immediate attention is on learning the stats-based build that you want to invest in, learning to follow and rest at graces, learning of enemies' weaknesses and how to exploit that, learning of your first big objective, which is to make it to Stormvale Castle for a showdown with one of the game's first major bosses. But again, that straightforwardness is not linear. There is a need to venture about, meeting NPCs, discovering new items or gear, and facing off against the over 100 secondary bosses. But in those early hours, one is also learning of the limitations. Taking a run from Limgrave to Caelid will likely end up in the infamous "you died" screen. Enemies do not scale to the player's level. Instead, each region is designed based on the level that you should be at. Still though, there isn't necessarily barriers in the way preventing one from running past Stormvale and exploring Rea Lucaria. Obviously it will be harder, but even From Software has provided various hidden shortcuts, giving players that choice, that option of difficulty. But of course, you're not explicitly told this. This is for you to discover or not. It's a game of trial and error, which made this so enjoyable and fresh. It truthfully reminds me of when I was a child playing the older Zelda games for the first time with my dad. We would sit there for hours toying around with many puzzles, often finishing off those play sessions in defeat, but when we did achieve success, it was a feeling just so sweet. It made the struggle worth it. With Elden Ring, that's a feeling that you deal with often as the game throws so much nonsense at you, whether that be facing off against bosses such as Millennia, the Godskin Duo, General Radahn, or the Dragon Lord Placidusax. Those victories, when you achieve them, are the most rewarding moments in all of gaming, especially when some of these bosses and enemies clip through walls, hide around corners, and literally sometimes 360 no-scope you. Miyazaki, he knew what he was doing. But getting past that BS and advancing forward, nothing more satisfying. But that is not all, folks, because in between those intense fights, there's so much to discover. The environmental design of Elden Ring is my favorite in years, from lush forests to floating rock towns to golden cities to foggy swamplands to snowy mountains to giant trees to the corrupt wasteland of Caelid to the magical academy of Raya Lucaria to the floating ruins of crumbling Farum Azula, which is surrounded by tornadoes, dragons, and a feeling of dread. At every turn, Elden Ring surprises you with variety in the lands between. For Christ's sake, there's giant turtles with buildings on top of them. But this overall point is pushed further thanks to the sheer amount of verticality to it. My first time making it to Siofra River was a magical moment. After exploring the entirety of the underground region, figuring out how to activate and beat the Ancestor Spirit boss, I wondered if the other locations in the distance would be explorable, and to my surprise later I gained access to Nokron Eternal City. I just seriously love how the world evolves based on our actions. Whether that be the fallen star that creates a crater in part of the world giving us access to Nokron after defeating Radahn, or after defeating Malekith and the royal capital becomes the Ashen capital. Ultimately, there's a lot to love about Elden Ring, things that I can appreciate even more so now and likely in the years to come. I could sit here for an hour talking about all of the little amazing intricacies and all of the different options that players are presented with to create their best Tarnished. There seriously is a ridiculous amount of weapons, armor, spells, incantations, ashes of war, talismans, and other items that in most games would be locked behind a stupid fucking in-game store. Not an incentive for exploring a hidden passage, accessing a secret room, solving a puzzle, opening a chest, beating a boss, and so on and so forth. Still though, Elden Ring is not perfect. No game is. While unfortunately some of the louder criticisms have been directed at things that I don't believe matter, there have been a lot aimed at the narrative of Elden Ring. The storytelling is certainly non-traditional, and I think one major gripe is with this very, very evil man. A lot of people have tried for reasons to dismiss his involvement, but definitely seems like he's the guy to blame for giving us Renala, Rena, Ronnie, Radahn, Radagon, Ricard, Roger, Rodrika, and then Mog, Margit, Morgott, Michaela, Millicent, Marika, Melina, Millennia, Meleketh, and Godfrey, Godric, Godwin, Gideon, Jesus Christ. Sorry for the pronunciations, I always have issues with those. And these are just some of the characters' names. I understand FromSoft has a reputation for this too, but George Georgie boy, George R.R. Martin is especially egregious with this, doing it often with A Song of Ice and Fire, and thought he was slick with doing it yet again, giving almost all of the major characters names in Elden Ring with his initials and having them sound alike. Truly the work of a madman. Fortunately though, while yes, confusing at times because of the names, Elden Ring's story is quite good. There's a ton of interesting lore that is easy to miss, just as actual story content and quests are so easy to miss. Even in the award season, debate rages on about whether or not Elden Ring deserves praise for its narrative, and truthfully the best example of the game's excellence in this regard is when I first began my journey around Limgrave, eventually making it to a decrepit structure, and after defeating a few low-level enemies, I find myself underground thinking I was soon to be rewarded with opening a chest of goodies. Instead, a mysterious fog creeps out and teleports me to a crystal mine tunnel in which I face off against enemies that vastly overpower me, one of which my sword just bounces off of. Eventually I make the wise decision of sneaking out and find myself introduced to the blood-red sky of Caelid, or when I explore Liurnia of the Lakes and eventually make my way to a village with the NPCs all driven by madness, with their eyes glowing a bright orange. Exploring around a bit, a meter pops up showing I am being driven mad, and that is because of the Eye of Sauron-like tower. Making my way way to the tower, defeating the enemies in my way, allows me to defeat the madness before it consumes me. Another instance, this time when you discover Windmill Village in Altus Plateau, you come upon a bizarre scene, celebrating some sort of festival with inviting pink flowers surrounding them. Dozens of very tall, bloodthirsty old ladies are dancing and laughing, like something straight out of Midsummer. It's quite creepy, most of which are not hostile until the player initiates combat. Then their eyes turn to a glowing bright red and attack, with some spewing a poisonous vomit blood at the player. Disgusting. Exploring around a bit, you can come upon a spirit which just adds to the uneasy feeling you get from this place. The spirit making mention of the festive melody and trying to stop these old ladies from skinning him, which makes further sense when you make it to the top of the village, in which a boss fight occurs. You face off against the Godskin Apostle, which appears to have an outfit made up of skins, likely that of the men that originally made up the village's population. This is storytelling. Elden Ring is rich with it. Ronnie and the Dung Eater have lengthy quest lines which lead to their very own unique endings, Ronnie the best in my opinion. Volcano Manor eventually leads to a showdown with Ricard, Lord of Blasphemy. Bloody Finger Hunter Yura's story ends in his tragic death, as his last words are that he was no match for Eleonora, and later we're surprised to see his body somehow alive, but to shortly thereafter discover his soul is gone, and now he is possessed by a man that wishes chaos on the world. The Round Table Hold is full of conversations and quests, with a location evolving based on a progression and actions in the game world, with some surprises in store for the player, such as Gideon's betrayal of our Tarnished. So seeing Elden Ring being nominated for Best Narrative at Game Awards shows makes sense in my opinion. Yes, it's unconventional. Yes, there isn't tons of cutscenes and exposition dumps. Yes, a lot of it can be easily missed, but that is the charm of it. The joy of taking on new playthroughs and uncovering new mystery at every turn. While Elden Ring made its mark in the games industry with an explosion in popularity at launch, in the months since things have started to slow down, but through various patches FromSoft has been active with addressing one mostly busted aspect of the game, that being the game's PvP component. Specifically with patch 1.06, which arrived in August, is when this became a focus, because before then FromSoft understood majority of players are only interested in the single player, and that meant prioritizing that aspect of the experience, which brought fixes for many bugs players suffered, a few new quest phases for various NPCs, and numerous balance updates with everyone's favorite weapons, incantations, and Ashes of War being either buffed or nerfed, changes of which that do heavily factor into multiplayer as well, but I digress. Elden Ring has been a monumental achievement, one that was rewarded at release with nearly 1 million concurrent players on Steam, and as of today nearly 18 million copies sold. It feels like every couple of days there's some new remarkable feat that is breaking news in regards to unique runs, whether that be beating Millennia with just a dance pad or beating the entire game without taking a hit or leveling up. The cultural impact of Elden Ring has been extraordinary, not just with clips being shared of crazy moments, but with how the community has come together, whether that be in-game with hilarious so-called hints or the thousands of fun guides and builds being shared online. Elden Ring was worth the wait, a once-in-a-generation game that's influence will be felt for the foreseeable future, with undoubtedly other AAA studios learning the wrong lessons from FromSoft's massive success story. Making a game simply harder with no map markers doesn't appreciate what Miyazaki and his team built. They triumphed by respecting the curiosity of players, understanding the need to thrill and add tension throughout, but ultimately putting the responsibility on players' shoulders to craft their very own journey in an expansive, unrelenting, diverse world that is massive in both scope and scale, as well as full of mystery and reward. Towards the end of last year, Elden Ring received a free Colosseum update with patch 1.08, which introduced new hairstyles and further enhanced the multiplayer aspect of the game, giving players access to 3 previously inaccessible Colosseums that allows your Tarnished to engage in battle in new and diverse modes against other players. While this was thought to maybe be the end of Elden Ring's tale, it only recently was confirmed to not be. Shortly after the game's 1-year anniversary, the long-rumored page story DLC Shadow of the Erdtree was confirmed to be in development, alongside a teaser image which appears to show Miquella riding on Torrent. Regardless of when Elden Ring's final chapter is is etched in stone, From Software's reputation has boosted to the top of this games industry, with many anticipating any and every of their next moves. There is an appetite, maybe even a hunger for gamers wanting to see developers push this medium forward with innovation, something of which From Software greatly accomplished here and hopefully will continue to do so in the years ahead. Anyway, what are your feelings on Elden Ring? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below, but thank you for watching. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this video or if you found any informative value, and make sure to follow my other social media accounts for updates on new videos. Links are always down in the description below. I'm most active on Twitter, giving opinions on news that I do not always get into video form, so do make sure to follow me over there. Also check out my Discord for all sorts of discussion on games, and again, thank you for joining. Consider subscribing for more videos like this, and I'll see you later.